Hello, Tim.
Good afternoon.
Oh, that's not working. Okay, why? Everything should be on here, but it's not.
Well, I can see you. I can hear you.
You're not hearing me, right?
No, I hear you.
No, I can see, or I'm not hearing you. Something's wrong here. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not muted, so.
That's a new one.
Yeah, there's always a new
I'm going to go out and come back in.
Yeah, that's probably the best idea.
Can you hear me now, Tim?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, I can hear you now. I don't know what it was. It must have been. Oh, well.
Who knows? Twisted connections. It is what it is.
How are you doing?
Well, as soon as I'm done here, I get in the car and go get my second vaccination shot.
Oh, really? We had ours yesterday.
And did you have a reaction?
The shoulder's a little sore, but I had nothing else other than that.
Oh,
the shoulder's a little sore, and I had a full workout this morning, so the balance and timing were all there when I was playing table tennis. So I was moving around pretty quickly. So everything so far is fine, and we're not running any temperatures or anything else like that. My neighbor,
different for everybody.
It depends on everybody. Everybody is a little different.
Right. Yeah, we have a neighbor he's extremely fit. He's probably 50, but he got his because he's military. He works up at Fort Stewart, and he runs. I mean, he runs marathons, and so he's a very fit guy, and it knocked him out for 2 days.
I've heard that from different people, and Moderna apparently is tougher on some people than the Pfizer was.
Yeah, well, I'm Moderna, so we'll see. I'll let you know.
Okay. I forgot what they tell you to take.
I think they said like a couple Advil or something.
Right. It's something along those lines. Advil or ibuprofen.
Ibuprofen. Yeah.
That's what they recommend.
But luckily tomorrow I've got nothing pressing that needs to be done. So if I need the time to just have a day to do nothing and relax, that's okay.
Okay.
So kind of great.
Anyway, you're getting it, and that's the important thing. And they didn't cancel on you.
Right. No, I just want it done. I just want it finished.
So where are you getting it? Memorial or?
No, I'm getting it through the vaccines that hospice set up. Okay. And they have set up an entire clinic at a branch of Savannah Technical College, which is kind of out near Pooler.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
So that's where they've got this whole setup. It's very well organized. It's very well put together. So that's where I'm going. That's where I went for the first one, going back for the second one. And like I said, I'm just glad I'll finally have it.
It almost seems, well, I understand the people working there, but that would be the important thing, of course. Obviously, people in hospice probably don't need the vaccine. The patients themselves don't need it.
No, you're probably looking more at staff,
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Well, our next door neighbor, she's some kind of biggie over there. She works there, She's got a fairly good position with them. She knows Rabbi Haas. I mean, she's not Jewish, but she knows Rabbi Haas because he does work with hospice. So
Right,
she
of
knows him
course.
very well. So she's the one who told me, she says, we've got extras. If you can come on Friday, several
That,
weeks ago, she
yeah,
says, I can get you in because we can't waste these. So that's how I was able to get in.
right. That's the important thing. They don't waste it. And right. And I've heard that it's happened here too to, some of our people, especially, they stood by at some of the healthcare facilities.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, they've been able to get it.
Right.
Thank you, dear.
Hey, Tim, let this move along. We want to see you guys again.
I know. Let's hope that finally we're going to get there. I mean, I think everybody's just kind of over, everything. We have to do it, but we're tired of it. We're tired of it.
Right,
We're
of
on
course.
a year. It's a year march. It was last March when all of this hit.
And we will be wearing the masks even after the vaccinations
Of
for quite
course.
some time.
Oh yeah. Dr. Fauci was saying, we could be wearing masks right on through the end of the year, and who knows, now, the different strains that they have coming up. And
I know. I just laid in the whole new stock of masks. I was finally went out and got some good upgraded ones. They were available from some Connecticut manufacturer, and they shipped it down in 2 days. It was terrific.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I finally got a hold of some of those N95 masks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and they're talking at the synagogue about opening for some in-person services, maybe end of April, May, beginning of May.
Yeah, I hear that.
But they're going to do, I think they're going to start with Friday night first, because Friday night tended to be a smaller crowd, and that'll help them to
Oh,
work out
yes, sure.
the logistics and everything before they start up with Saturday morning Shabbat services again. But they've been working on it. I know that they've been down there planning, and how they're going to have people separate, and what about up on the bima, if people come up to read, make sure the rabbi stays separate from whoever is reading. And I even brought up the point, I said, and then we used to have people come up and help undress and dress the Torah. Well, that's close proximity. I don't know that we can do that anymore, at least right away. So,
Well, unless you do the Torah dressing by couples.
yeah, within a household, then the rabbi
So
just have to stand away, maybe,
within the pod group,
right.
it'll be within the pod group. It could be a
Exactly.
one family going up.
But at least they're talking about it, so that's good, so we can hopefully get back, into the synagogue, which would be nice. It's sad that it's been sitting there for a year and there's been no services there.
It's a very we live in strange times.
We sure do.
Well, look at it. Look at Georgia. I mean, Georgia elected 2 Democratic senators. Is that strange times?
And then went for Joe Biden as well. So there you go.
And the 2 senators they represented were both unique in their own area too. I mean, that kind of, like I said, strange times.
It's very different.
So
all right, I'm gonna get going. I don't know if he's gonna
let me get out my pad here. Very
okay.
good. Okay. Oh, what did I do with it? Okay.
All right, so we're in the Torah portion called Tetzaveh. It continues this week with matters of and descriptions of a lot of ritual. We're given a very, very detailed description of the clothing that the priests are to wear as they're going to carry out the rituals for the honor of God, directions on the sacrifices that are to be performed both on a daily basis and a weekly basis. Aaron and his descendants have been selected by God. They are the ones who are going to function as the priests to the people. And the Torah doesn't really tell us exactly what the title of priest actually means or what it really entails. But most Torah scholars believe that there was a tradition of priests among people who were sort of desert people, so that the idea would have made sense to the people back then, even if we don't have a clarification of what exactly they mean by a priest. We think of it in terms of Roman Catholicism in most cases, but what did it actually mean back then? What kind of privileges went with it? Of course, they're going to carry out the rituals, but other than that, we really don't know what that term meant. Torah scholars also make clear that the very detailed clothing, the ritual clothing that the priests are to wear, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense among a nomadic desert kind of people. It's not practical. It would have likely been near impossible to actually make it from people who were wandering in the desert. So again, this suggests that the descriptions in this particular Torah portion were embellished sort of in later years, so that it would make these priestly vestments sound much more ornate and much more sort of impressive than maybe they really were. So once Judaism then changes, and once we become a rabbinic religion, we then, of course, focus on the synagogue rather than on the temple after the destruction of the Second Temple. And at that point, all this ornate clothing and all this ornate ritual that has been so thoroughly described here, we cast all of that aside and it becomes part of history, and we still have not brought any of that back, and we probably never will. Our congregational leaders today, of course, we call them rabbis, we don't wear stylized clothing, we don't wear stylized vestments when they're standing on the bima, when they're leading worship services. We also know that all the rituals of sacrifice that were very detailed in the temple, we don't gather as a community anymore to offer sacrifices. Instead, we gather when we're going to honor, when we're going to praise God. We use prayer, we use words. We're not slaughtering animals up on the bima. But what's interesting is that when you look at Roman Catholicism and you look at Eastern Christian, Orthodox Christian religions, much of that sense of very, very elaborate clothing has been maintained, much the way it is described in the Torah. Priests of those denominations wear vestments, bishops, even the Pope has vestments when they're leading the congregation in worship services. We have moved those things to our Torah scroll. The remnants of what the priestly vestments that are described in the Torah are really how we now dress our Torah in terms of the cloth and the ornamentation that we see on a Torah scroll is meant to mimic the vestments of the temple priests. We don't use incense in our services in the synagogue, but incense is still very common in certain Christian denominations, where incense will be used in certain parts of particular special Christian holy day services, but we have pretty much dispensed with the notion of incense as part of our regular weekly worship. We don't even use it when we get to the high holy days. And if you look at Catholic ritual and you look at Roman Catholic dogma, they still refer to the offering of bread and wine that the priest does up on the altar, which will ultimately become part of their Holy Communion. They still refer to that as the priest performing a sacrifice on the altar. That terminology is still there. And again, we have completely dispensed with that in Judaism. You know, we have a kiddush and we have a motzi after service, but our rabbis are not doing anything even remotely resembling a kind of sacrifice when they're standing on the bima in front of us. Now, also, we have a very egalitarian religion in Reform Judaism, and it would seem to be almost silly to think we were going to go back to these ornate sort of things, as to single out our clergy as somehow being better than those of us who are sitting in the seats. A lot of people don't even realize that in Judaism, you don't even need to have an ordained rabbi or an invested cantor to hold a valid worship service. Any adult who is past B'nai Mitzvah age, who has been familiar enough with the service and the rubrics of a service, can lead a congregation, including Torah reading if they know how to chant it, or of course they can simply read it in English or the vernacular of the people. So it seems like we as Jews, when we're looking at the Torah and this portion this week, we've done this complete 180-degree turn when it comes to what is considered ritual. We have made a complete switch. Now, is that a good change, or has Judaism lost something in dispensing with so much that is ritual, so much that is tradition? Well, in the early days of American Reform synagogues, we know that American Reform back in the early 1900s, there were rabbis who would not permit anybody to wear a kippah in the sanctuary or to wear a talit in the sanctuary. They wanted Judaism to completely modernize and even take those little remnants of ritual objects sort of to do away with them. Hebrew was minimized, and almost all prayers in early Reform were done in English, so that you had a 90 to 95% English versus Hebrew in the prayers. This was done to sort of help, specifically in this new nation, American Jews to blend in better with their Christian neighbors, just quite honestly. We started singing hymns as a congregation. We started having organs in our Reform synagogues. Now, if you look at recent Reform practice, we're now seeing the pendulum swing back again, because now we are seeing a little bit more of that ritual coming back to Reform Judaism. Now, I don't think we'll ever go back to the days of what we have described in the Torah, but some elements of traditional Judaism have returned. In a Reform congregation today, you will see those who have nothing on their heads, and you will see those who wear a kippah. You will see those who have nothing on their shoulders, and you will see those who are wearing talit. And in fact, you will even see in some congregations, women wearing a kippah or women wearing a talit. We are perfectly okay with that. If you look at our prayer books today, you can see a lot more that is in Hebrew, so that we are doing more praying in Hebrew. We are doing more chanting, more singing in Hebrew in both our Friday evening and our Saturday morning Shabbat services. Now, it varies from congregation to congregation. Some do more Hebrew, some do less Hebrew, depending on where you are and what the local custom or the local minhag is. Our rabbis and cantors nowadays, I mean, Rabbi Haas puts a talit over his suit coat, and that's it. We don't have like robes and vestments that we see in Christian clergy. You'll see him wear a kippah, you'll see him wear a talit, as would a cantor as well, and that's about as far as it goes. There is a renewed interest in Hebrew, in Reform Judaism, and people learning Hebrew. We get calls all the time of people wanting to study Hebrew. There is a renewed interest in Reform Judaism in studying Torah, in studying Talmud. So observance among Reform, while it was sort of pushed aside, is now coming back. And interestingly enough, it is really among the younger people who are wanting to see some of the return to tradition. So is that a good thing, or is it a bad thing? Should we have kept it all along? Should we go back to it? Should we not have it? Again, that's sort of a matter that we can discuss, and it's a matter of personal opinion as far as I can see it. I think it depends on what you see as meaningful. If it means something to you, then by all means, make it a part of your life, make it a part of your worship. We know that Reform Judaism is very open to change. We know that Reform Judaism doesn't feel like a Judaism that has to be stuck in one particular element of ritual or one particular way of doing things. We have changed from the Torah. We have changed throughout the years in history. We have changed the way we look at the world. We are always looking to be a progressive sort of Judaism rather than one that feels stuck, or one that feels this is the way it's been done, so this is the way we have to keep doing it, and this is the way we're going to do it forever and ever. That's not how Reform is defined. So there's a fine line here. Holding on to ritual merely for the sake of it being ritual because it's tradition is one thing. Abandoning it because it seems old, it seems dated, it seems meaningless is something else. So are we ever going to go back? We don't in Reform Judaism even expect the temple to ever be built again. That's not Reform theology. We don't expect to go back to a sacrificial cult. That is not Reform theology, unlike some of our Orthodox brethren. We are okay with making the changes as we see fit, and each individual congregation is also allowed to adapt its service for whatever seems to be appropriate to its particular group of people. So Reform Judaism is a forward-thinking, progressive faith community. It's embraced the stranger into its fold. It has made tikkun olam, repair of the world, sort of the central tenet of its belief system. And it's possible that we can be looking and moving forward, but at the same time, keep those elements of tradition that came before us. So I think the key here is balance. The key here is freedom of choice. So the so-called old rituals and old traditions, they're not Orthodox, although the Orthodox hold on to them. They're Jewish. They're all Jewish. And we need to keep them open to all Jews, to those who feel comfortable and those who don't feel comfortable. I always like to think of Reformed Judaism as being informed Judaism, so that you have the knowledge to decide what makes sense for you. And that's really, I think, what makes us as a movement really so rich. So I took this whole Torah portion to look at the whole notion of ritual and tradition. And what do we keep? What do we throw out? You know, what's coming back? What's probably never, ever going to come back? And I'm sure you've been in different congregations with different levels of observance. I mean, our congregation in Ohio was much more Hebrew oriented than the congregation here in Savannah. I mean, the congregation here, Mikveh Israel, is still using the Union Prayer Book, which is a more traditional of the classical reform versus the Mishkan Tefillah, which is the more, the current one.
Putting us
Go ahead,
on.
you're on.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Tim, a few questions as you were talking. With incest, not incest.
Incense.
Incest. All right. God, you see how my mouth. This is not being taped, I hope. All right.
Oh, no one's ever going to see it now.
Yes. Well,
Jeff, why did you ask the question? What is the purpose of it in Christianity, and why did we decide not to use it?
I think the purpose in Christianity very much mirrors the purpose in the Torah. The Torah talks about sending a pleasing scent up to God. Because the smoke would rise, it was supposed to be something that was pleasing and pleasant. So it was a way for a communication between the people to God, to honor God, to please God. And that is still, I think, the Christian theology behind incense, is to create an aroma that is pleasing to God, something that will make God, I guess, for lack of a better word, happy, and make him realize that we are here, we are thinking of him. I don't know if you've ever been in a Christian service where incense is used.
Oh, yeah.
I find it kind of nauseating myself. I mean, I know it's supposed to be a pleasant smell, but when I've been to a few weddings and things where they've had incense or whatever, I'm like, oh, it kind of makes my nose run, actually.
Is it a uniform scent?
What Christianity uses, well, at least Roman Catholicism, what they do is, of course, they have Palm Sunday. What they do with the palms that are left from Palm Sunday, once they begin to deteriorate, that's what they use to make the incense.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I never knew that. Did you know
And
that?
they've got a little, I forgot the name of it, but if you've seen the little thing, they kind of swing around and the smoke comes out. And,
Oh, yes.
yeah, I think it's maybe called a censer. I'm not sure.
I went down when I was down in South America. I went to that cathedral down there. I think it was in Quito or Guayaquil. But in the big cathedral there, as part of, that was all part of the mass. And when I was talking to my guide, he was telling me that they really needed it at the services because, now I don't know if he was trying to be funny or if he was, he said, deodorant isn't a very common thing down here. And we really need the incense. So I don't know if it was just a joke or if he
Well,
was.
it's hot area. They would perspire.
But it was, it was a packed congregation. It was a packed service and there were a lot of people there, I could understand then the purpose.
Well, maybe in those congregations in, that are, along the equator there, much hotter climate than we have.
Oh, it
Maybe
was.
does,
Yes.
maybe
It
it does double duty. Maybe they have incense to please God, and maybe they also use it to, make the entire building, the church building, smell better. Maybe it has a double duty, why not?
I don't
But
think, yeah.
Tim, why didn't Judaism continue that?
It seems to be historically, once the second temple was destroyed, that the rituals and practices of the temple would not come back until the temple would come back. So when we were moving away from temple Judaism into rabbinic Judaism, all those rituals that were associated with the temple would not ever be performed until we again had a temple in Jerusalem in which to perform them. Now, in Orthodox theology, they still have in their liturgy the prayers for the restoration of the temple.
Yes.
Reform Judaism excised those out of the prayer book years ago. And they still hope for, which I find interesting, they still hope and pray for a return to the sacrificial cult of the temple, as they call it, that will someday be revived as well. But it can't happen until we actually have a temple. So once the temple was destroyed, the second temple was no more, all of those rituals that were a part of it also went away until we would again have a temple in Jerusalem.
What was the, my turn and then your turn? Okay. We only have two when we're fighting over the top. What was the purpose of sacrifice to God?
Well, again, it was a way of pleasing God. You took your best, you took a best species of an animal. I mean, you could not do something that was maimed or blemished or in any way, not a perfect specimen. And it was the idea it would, again, I mean, think about in your house, on Thanksgiving, you're roasting a turkey and that wonderful homey smell that you get that, as the turkey's roasting and it's pleasing and it makes you feel hungry and anticipate the Thanksgiving feast when you're finally going to sit down to dinner. The idea with those same aromas would be pleasing to God. And it was a way of thanking God. Okay, we have sustenance, we have the animals, etc. We're going to offer the best that we have to God. The aromas will be pleasing to God. The whole idea of the smoke going up and the aromas going up to God was a way of hoping that God would then look favorably down from the heavens and upon the people and be merciful to them. So it really all came down to, it was a way of keeping that covenant where we are doing what God has asked us to do. So we need to do things to please God.
Tim, there was a
Who said I was finished?
there was a documentary that I saw about a year or so ago about the rebuilding of the temple by the Orthodox movement. And they had this big, elaborate production and what they're working on and what they're doing. There is a whole group, and I don't know if it's the entire Orthodox community there in Israel, but there certainly is a large group making all these plans and elaborate. They're doing the vestments and all the elaborate, the
Right.
whole thing. I don't know how far they've gotten, but this has been an ongoing project.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's still their hope. You just, as they're waiting, hoping, also for the Messiah or the Mashiach, which is again in reform, we have changed the whole theology of the Mashiach, the Messiah as well. We pray for a messianic age, a time when there will be peace on earth and people of all backgrounds and all faiths and whatever will respect each other and get along, and that we won't have the strife and we won't have the war. It's kind of, what we pray when we say the Aleinu, when everyone will recognize that you are God and God alone. But we are, as Reformed Jews, we're not expecting all of a sudden a Messiah in the form of a person, a being, if you will, to show up. That's not Reformed theology. it's still very much Orthodox theology. And as you know, different people throughout the years have been false messiahs or have been proclaimed as messiahs, only to be found out, well, no, that's not true. We're not looking for that. We're not expecting someone, we could be in services on Saturday morning and someone walks in and says, here I am, I'm the Messiah or the Mashiach. That's not how Reformed theology works anymore.
And
You're taking
I am
too
quite
long.
certain if Jesus had a second coming, he would have a very hard time being accepted within the Catholic community if he suddenly showed up. So it would be probably difficult.
Yeah, Jesus is way too liberal. Jesus is way too liberal for the evangelicals, that's for sure.
That would be, I'm not even going to get into that. But that would be, I told a friend of mine one time, I said, you're talking about social reform and socialism and communism. I said, you worship maybe the greatest social reformer of, the modern era.
Exactly. I've always been, well, this is Caleb and I have discussed this. We always think of Jesus as, because he was Jewish, he was raised Jewish, he went to the synagogue and whatever. We always think of Jesus as maybe like the first Reform rabbi.
Yeah. That's certainly one way to look at it.
So you see him as Rabbi Haas.
Yeah, so yeah, we can call Rabbi Jesus, Rabbi Jesus, but I mean, because he was making big changes, and
Absolutely.
So why couldn't he have been like an early Reform rabbi before there even was such a thing as Reform Judaism?
Yeah.
How did they decide what would be symbolic for sacrifice?
You mean like which sort of animals and plants?
I'm thinking on the Pesach table, as far as we have the shank bone, right?
Right,
Isn't
right.
that okay? All right. That comes from an animal. Now again, why the shank bone over any other part of the
I'm thinking part of it too was probably practicality, as what they had was there, what they were raising. I mean, you couldn't expect to use an animal that was not pretty prevalent among the people, so you can't make it so impossible. And it was more about making sure that it was a clean, not sickly, healthy, unblemished animal was, I think, the most important, but they used what they had. And I'm guessing, being sort of nomadic, that there was some element of sheep or lamb or whatever. Interestingly enough, camels didn't get in there anywhere. So, we don't
put them on your Passover plate.
They're large, but I mean, we don't, I suppose, do they, it's a good question. Do they eat camel meat over in the Middle East?
I'm going to ask, is camel kosher? I'm not sure.
I don't think so, but.
Well, does it chew its cud? I think so.
I think it does chew a cud.
And the
It's like a llama. Isn't it related to the llama?
Yeah, I don't know. It might be. I'd have to ask
I'd
have to ask the rabbi that.
Yeah, but they're the rabbi. Is camel kosher?
Somehow
Not.
Yeah, I don't think anybody kind of eats it, because I think it's one of the more disgusting type, tough type, challenging meats.
It depends where in the world. When we were in Europe, there were butcher shops that advertised horse meat.
Oh yeah. You
wouldn't go rushing to eat it.
No.
That's here they are.
Right.
Tim, when you're going on about Reform Judaism being open to change and things like that, does Reform Judaism get the most Jews by choice over the other branches of Judaism because
yes,
it's most open?
Yes. Well, partly too, because one of the former heads of the Union of Reform Judaism, I'm trying to remember his name. His name may have been Schindler, Rabbi Schindler. I'm not sure of that. Back in the sort of early 70s, one of the things that he made part of his tenure as the head of the Union of Reform Judaism was the fact that we are going to be welcoming to those who want to join us. In fact, he's the one who put into place, We need to have curriculums like the Judaism 101. We need to have ways for people who want to explore Judaism and then may decide they want to be a part of Judaism. We need to have an open door policy. We need to let them know that we are open to taking in converts, which was not something that Judaism was known for at all. So that was a major shift when he proposed that, and Very then followed up on it. And Reform congregations then used to offer, as they do now, classes to help people to understand the basic precepts of Judaism and welcome them as Jews by choice. Now, conservative Judaism in the time period has followed suit, because they do something very similar. It's still very difficult. You can convert to Orthodoxy, but they don't make it easy. They don't have sort of the open door policy, like if you're searching and you think we would be a good fit for you spiritually, come and join us. So they're still the holdout. But in Reform Judaism, conservative Judaism, we want to embrace those. We don't go out looking for them. That's still not something we do. As I said, we don't sit on park benches and hand out, religious tracts and things of that. But when someone calls, and we get calls, like, I answer the phone at the synagogue and we get calls from people who just say, I've read some things about Judaism. I'm interested. What should I do? Or what can I do? Or do you have anything for me? And that's how some of the people in Judaism 101 have come to be in Judaism 101. In the meantime, before the class, I give them some ideas of some books they might want to read. I give them some of the good websites that they can look at for good information on Judaism, so that they're not just sitting there waiting, if it's a couple of months before the class. Because I've been in contact with some of the people that are in the class right now for 5-6 months.
And you're in the middle of COVID.
Yes. Well, that is also true.
Can't even come and person to person come to a service and experience.
Right. Because normally one of the first things that would happen if somebody called and was interested, I would invite them to come in for just, a face-to-face meeting, have them meet the rabbi, sit down and talk with him as well. And, just sort of let them get a feel for the office and the synagogue and whatever, because some had never been to Mikveh Israel before. Some had said, well, I came to a service once, or I came to a service twice. But now all of that has had to be either via just phone or Zoom or whatever. But as you can see, it hasn't dissuaded people. I mean, people are still there and still hoping, to convert.
Any people in the class?
I'm sorry, what?
Have you lost any people in the class, or it's still the same number?
The people who are there for conversion are still there. It was interesting. I had a few people who contacted me, and then they came to maybe the first or two and they didn't. One was, interestingly enough, a Catholic priest who contacted me and wanted to be, and I don't know what I tried not to say anything offensive. I would point out differences between Christian and Jewish, philosophy and theology, but I don't try to be offensive to the other. But I don't know. But I never heard from him again, so I don't know what happened to him.
Tim, how did you know he was a priest at one?
Because he told me when he contacted me. He told me.
That's what you call a real crisis of faith. I've only seen it one time.
We had it in New Jersey.
Yeah, I remember
An Orthodox Jew.
An Orthodox Jew who previously was a priest.
And he went Orthodox. He needed that very structure.
Right.
But that of course is it's a rarity. It'd be like,
Oh, and we have here, I don't know if I told you, in Sun City, we have a woman. She's now president of the synagogue of Sun City, so to speak, and she was a nun.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you mentioned her. I think I do remember you telling me.
It's very interesting roads people take, and I've always felt, that it's nice to be welcoming and hearing, I didn't realize Reform Judaism went back that far.
Reformed Judaism has its beginnings in Germany, interestingly enough. Like the early 1800s, there were some rabbis, during the period of the Enlightenment, who realized that there needed to be some changes in the traditional service and the worship and all of that. And so there were some, I guess you could call them movers and shakers, who were sort of the beginnings of Reformed Judaism. But then it would take several years until it sort of organized itself into a body of like-minded rabbis and like-minded Jews who were also thinking we need to make some changes. Reform really, though, didn't really begin to grow until the United States. It really took hold once it crossed the ocean, and once it became, and then we, opening, Hebrew Union College to train rabbis and to have some standardization of worship and practice and all of that. That really didn't happen until here in the United States in the middle to later 1800s. It's really the flourishing of reform.
And conservative is, generally speaking, the newest branch. It was kind of a snapback from the reform. I mean,
exactly.
Right. They said, "Oh, you've gone too far."
Yeah. Well, you know the story of the first class of rabbinical students who were graduating from Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, and they had a banquet and they served treif. They mixed meat and dairy, and there were some who just said, okay, you've gone way too far. We can't accept this. And ultimately, part of that is what then began the whole branch that we know today as conservative Judaism.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they still call it the treif banquet. That was
right. I remember hearing that.
There were 4 students who were graduating as the first 4 graduates as rabbinical students from Hebrew Union College, and that's a big deal. So they made it into a really big affair. They invited people in the community. They invited civic leaders, and then the first thing they just served was shrimp cocktail.
Right.
That's not the most story. The caterer was never used again.
Well, it is estimated that among Reform Jews, I think the latest number that I came across is that in Reform Judaism, 9% keep kosher.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Higher than I would have thought.
We were in that, but then when Jeff came down to the Low Country, he said, 50 years of marriage, I have followed kosher. It's my turn now.
But it's interesting that there are people who are taking a look at it. And as I said, it's younger people who are looking at the whole notion of being kosher. I have a couple of the students, I'm not going to mention who they are because it's private, I guess, to them. They want to keep kosher. They want to convert, and they want to have a completely kosher home once they convert.
Well, it's very easy if you're a vegetarian.
Right. And I mean, even in a place like Savannah, it's a challenge. Bigger cities, you have more options, of kosher markets and things of that sort. But, here in Savannah, I mean, Kroger has its little kosher section, and Publix has its little kosher section.
Is it all frozen or all prepackaged? It's not.
Yeah, well, the meats all come in, pre-cut, pre-packaged with the kosher seal and everything. And of course, they carry a certain amount of the frozen, type things, to entrees and soups and whatever, and then the Manischewitz line of products and that kind of thing, so.
I want to ask you a question you covered so much, and I wait, it's called Our Hour with Tim. Larry and Jane were getting their second shot and had a cardiologist.
He's getting his today.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going. Yep.
Talk fast. Okay. What made it that the traditional Jews allowed on Purim that men could dress as women? That to me is so they're going against. I know it was for 24 hours, but just that they would think of it is.
I don't know. All I know is that the tradition. I mean, I did the food for thought yesterday for the JEA.
I know we missed it because we were getting our shot. How did it?
It went well. And one of the things I talk about is where did the origin of the whole, the perm spiel and the dressing up and the whatever. Some of it was a way to mimic the sort of carnivals that were in Italy prior to Christian observance of Lent, or like we have Mardi Gras here. So people would dress up in crazy, wacky costumes and, kind of let loose, as so to speak. And so the whole Purim carnival festival thing, and because they come close together. I mean, we just had the beginning of Lent in Christianity, and now we're at Purim. So like Christmas and Hanukkah are close together. Purim and the beginning of Lent are frequently, very closely tied. So it was a Jewish way of having, well, we're going to have something where we kind of let loose too, costuming. the Purim spiel as a play where we really get into the whole cross-dressing kind of thing started in Eastern Europe, interestingly enough, in the very late 1800s. And that would suggest that it was done in the shtetls among people who were pretty observant Jews, following an orthodoxy, if you will, because that's what they did. And I don't know if it just started because it was a way of, we're just going to completely turn the tables, because remember, you're supposed to drink, the idea you can get drunk on Purim and, gorge yourself on Hamentashen and the whole thing. But so maybe it was just this complete turnaround. We are so strict for the other 364 days of the year. We're going to have this one day where we can just be as crazy as we want to be. And then as soon as it's over, we go back to studying the Talmud and the Torah and all of that.
Hopefully.
Right. Well, I just read an article in the foreword that they are having a really, really big issue in the yeshivas, the Orthodox male yeshivas, with binge drinking.
Really?
Really?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's becoming quite a problem, I guess. And they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. And then they were worried that it was really going to be for Purim, that they were really going to go overboard. So there were they just something they really have to be on top of. But apparently, yeah, it's becoming a real problem.
Well, it's amazing it got out and it was published, because usually they keep things very...
Yeah, well, this was it. Like I said, this was the foreword just this week. I can't remember which day. It comes into my mailbox every day at the synagogue with different stories, related to whatever. And that was one of the stories that I happened to catch. I want to say this was maybe like Tuesday when I saw it.
Did you ever find out? I asked Rabbi Haas, and he said, good question. He didn't know when he was going to check. As far as when they're giving a I won't say an order, request, whatever you want to say, with drinking during the holiday. I said, what about women? And he said, that's interesting. I don't know.
About women for what?
Supposed to drink too.
Oh, for Purim?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just thought it was kind of an across the board kind of thing, but maybe that's because I think in a reform way, we don't really separate what's okay for, a woman or a man. Maybe orthodoxy, I don't know whether they, the women have to just sort of sit there and watch it all happen and they don't get to partake, I told him yesterday, I said, whatever it is, your favorite, your wine, your bourbon, your whatever, but don't drive. Make sure you're doing this at home.
Yeah.
I guess somebody has to be there to become the designated walker. So
Yeah.
find walker so they can find a way home.
Yeah, I said, this year, everybody's kind of doing it at home anyway, because there's none of the synagogues are doing celebrations this year. Yeah, you're supposed to get so drunk that you can't tell whether, you're supposed to be cursing the name of Haman or blessing the name of Mordecai.
Right.
I was brought up, Hamentashen were always mun and were always prune. Now they've branched out into apricot, raspberry, this and that. Was that a few years ago they did that? Traditionally, I was brought up Orthodox. I just never saw any other flavors but mun and prune. And now it's all kinds of flavors.
I think just as Jews became more visible, as we no longer felt like, in the United States, we had to sort of, hide anymore, and the aftermath of the Holocaust and the founding of Israel and all of that, I think people just started experimenting with the different flavors, because I talked about I tried to research what's the most popular flavor of Hamentashen. And every site I went to had a different answer. So I went to My Jewish Learning, which is a great site. And I believe they had cherry as number one.
No,
Really?
I've never believed that.
Then I went to kosher.com to see what they had. They had apricot as number one. And then BuzzFeed, I think, had strawberry as number one. But you know what was number two on every list? Chocolate.
Never heard of that.
Wow.
Well, okay. Orly Hankin, Rabbi Hankin's wife, She had something on Facebook yesterday about Boozy Hamentashen. You make this dough and you put Guinness beer in the Hamentashen dough. The filling has bourbon. It's chocolate with some bourbon in it. And then you make a drizzle over the top with Bailey's Irish cream icing.
Where can I find that?
Well, that's what I put. I put the comment. I said, you need to share this recipe because those sound really, really delicious.
Well, you know what?
That might be a very good item for the temple to sell.
Exactly. Then you can get your booze and cookie all in one, you know.
When you say don't drink and drive, here it's don't eat and drive.
Don't have one of these cookies if you're going to take a trip right afterwards. So, yeah, I mean,
that is well, if you find out where, let us know.
Hey, I'm gonna try to get a hold of that, and I'll just share it. I'll put it out there and say, here, anybody who wants this interesting sort of boozy Hamentashen, I'd make them even if it's not Purim. I don't care.
We're coming over.
So yeah, but it's too bad there's no Purim. I mean, I guess they're having a drive-by thing at the JEA, a drive-by Purim thing at the JEA on Sunday, but you know, we're not. And then of course they're doing the. I don't know the Zoom Purim spiel they're doing tonight. The rabbi, he's kept this very quiet. He's not told us hardly anything about it. Yeah, so well, I don't know what to expect with the theme. You know.
5:30. Okay, we got 3.5 hours to find out. So.
Tim, before, because we've only been a member, I guess, a year and a half or so, 2 years. Did the synagogue have a Purim carnival, or carnivals are out? I was brought up they would have carnivals.
Well, they used to do that through Shalom School, which was jointly between, you know, AA and CMI. They would do something through Shalom School and have a Purim carnival for the kids, you know, which would usually be on the Sunday morning closest to Purim. You know, but obviously that's not happening this year either, unfortunately, for the kids, you know.
You should show Tim, wait, I'm going to get something. You talk.
What time's your appointment?
I gotta leave by about 2:15 and I'll get there in plenty of time.
Oh, so. Don't want to keep you past that. So
no, I'm not missing this. There's no way I'm missing this.
That's how we felt yesterday. We showed up actually an hour early for the.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure I'm there a little bit early, just, you know, because like I said, I don't want to take any chances. You know, if I have to wait a little bit, I'm okay. I'm fine.
Oh, it worked out well. They took us right away. They took us out. They took us early.
Oh, that's good. So maybe if I get there a little early, maybe I'll get to go right on in, you know.
Charleston hospital system had it worked out terrific. I mean,
well, I have to say, when I got the first one out here, they were very well organized. Everything was very well organized, you know, which impressed me. You know, they had a lot of people helping. They had, you know, just every step of it was very, very well done.
Show Tim this is our son that then became a Marine. 1 minute, I'm just and that's what brought us down here. I mean, so I'm leading to a Marine that's macho junk and all this. He was Queen Esther. Show the picture.
Well, there you go. Oh my goodness.
See that?
Yep. Oh, there it is.
And we said to him, you know, with going and dressing up, what do you want to be? And he said, I'm going to be Queen Esther. Come on, we're open. We didn't say anything. If that's
hey, there you go. Like I said, if you're going to completely turn the tables, just go for it.
That's my sweater and he looks better in it. I thought that was our Queen Esther. Do you remember that?
Yeah. That was, kind of a crazy day.
Our rabbi in Ohio, he always had some part where he dressed up as some old woman. They just write something into the story for him just so he could walk out on stage with gray hair and a cane and in his old woman voice and do something, just because everybody waited for it. Everybody just waited for him to show up, you know.
Well, this is going to be interesting because this one is being done virtually, right?
Yes, everybody's going to be in their own homes on Zoom with their parts. I guess they had a rehearsal Monday evening. So they could know exactly how they're going to handle it and run through it and whatever. But like I said, the rabbi has been very, very closed about not letting us have any sneak previews on it.
Well,
So.
we'll let you run. We got a couple of errands ourselves.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping I get it. I don't have, you guys were lucky. No big reaction. I hope I don't either. But if tomorrow just becomes a lay-low day for me, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, but you know what?
You're honoring Shabbat.
Exactly.
If you lose a day or two because you're not feeling fantastic, it's well worth the protection.
I totally agree with you. Completely agree with you.
Just don't know that.
Yeah. Well, enjoy this beautiful weather. It's supposed to be a beautiful weekend, so enjoy it. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
I bet